What is up, fight fans, and welcome to an all-new edition of the Scrap Report. I am, of course, the Dana White of Ringside Intel, Jason Burgos. And with me, as always, is the Gandalf the Grey of Hate, the one and only Ant Walker, Senor ABW. How are you today?
Pretty good, man. I'm just a little disappointed that you get to call yourself the Dana White of Ringside and I'm not the Hunter Campbell. I'm highly offended by this.
I mean, there's a lot of nerds out there that would love to be considered Gandalf instead of Hunter Campbell.
But if we're in the UFC context, like what would Dana White be in the Lord of the Rings universe? Like he'd be nobody.
He'd be Sauron.
No, he would be nobody. He would be just some regular bald guy that would get disintegrated by like when Smeagol, sprayed some energy out of the precious. That's what he would be.
Fair enough. We have a lot of stuff to talk about in this new episode of the show. We're going to talk about Sean O'Malley, his UFC 306 loss a little bit. What's next for him? We're going to look at Anthony Joshua. He also lost recently in a bit of an upset. Tom Aspinall, we got a little bit of an exclusive on Ringside and get his thoughts, talk his thoughts about some of the questions he answered. Speaking of Dana White seems to be getting into the boxing game. That's what we're going to talk about. Also, we're going to do some early UFC 307 predictions. But first, going back to UFC 306, Sean O'Malley. We talked about it. We did the predictions. I wasn't overly confident. In the end, it was pretty close odds on that one going into the fight. But Merab Dvalishvili really does to Sean O'Malley what pretty much he's done to everybody. It's impressive. I mean, he's not as exciting as he's not a George St. Pierre type with his wrestling, and then you're looking at his elite athleticism, technique, is just relentlessness, and everyone knows what's coming, and they still can't stop it, no matter how good they are. So the big question is there any case that can be made for a rematch? I know Sean O'Malley after the fight, he was talking about, he won rounds 1, 3, and 5. He hurt Merab late, and then it got a little interesting. But is there any case for Sean O'Malley, considering how big of a star he is, how UFC sometimes books? Should he get a rematch, or it was a definitive loss, and it's just you got to go somewhere else?
There's no way that you can make a legitimate case for an immediate rematch outside of being an accountant for the UFC. There's the only people that can sit there and say, hey, we need to make this fight happen. There was nothing in that fight that made me want to see it again. And quite honestly, it could happen again. O'Malley could very well fight himself back to a title. But that will mean he would have to prove himself yet again, and he'd have to take the route that a lot of people have done when they lost the belt, and they have to fight their way back into contendership, which would make for a more interesting buildup. I don't think you really can sell an O'Malley Dvalishvili 2 right now. You can't. Like, who wants to see that? The most entertaining part of it was when Dvalishvili kissed him. Like that was the most entertaining part, and not to point at Merab and call him a boring fighter or anything like that, but there was no sort of real suspense. It was just domination the whole way through. So no, O'Malley does not deserve an immediate rematch, and he didn't hold the belt long enough to even be brought up in that conversation either.
Is there a case that can be made from a business perspective that maybe Merab should kind of push for it? It'll get him a good payday again. He should have a whole bunch of confidence. He should win. Should maybe Merab kind of push for it? Because the options after that are not as box office as Sean O'Malley. What could 2 wins over Sean O'Malley do for Merab in his career and trying to get a lot of big paydays? Because he's not a young guy. He's starting to get there in the second half of his 30s. Should Merab push for it or no? He should go in another direction as well.
I mean, he is a prize fighter. Go for the biggest prize. And quite honestly, by what we saw at Noche UFC, that's probably the easiest matchup for him in the top 5. So go for it. I still don't want to see it, but that probably sells better than him and Umar Nurmagomedov, which is probably going to be next. That's probably going to be the next fight. So I guess, I mean, Merab is sort of in this weird spot where like he's clearly better than the peers that he has fought so far, has the belt to prove it, and there's nothing really too exciting for him as far as what those pay-per-view points are going to look like.
Yeah. From there, then, if it's Sean O'Malley's not going to be in a rematch, which I agree, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Where should he go next? Should it be Corey Sandhagen? Should it be Peter Yan? rematch PR because they had a fantastic fight. It was a couple years ago now. Should it be Henry Cejudo, who they've had this ongoing feud for a long time? This classic moment where Henry Cejudo was like bothering him and heckling him during an interview that got caught on video and became like this fantastic, like the Office style meme and everything with Davis and Figueiredo in the background. All three of them after his loss kind of was calling for the fight. If it's one of those guys, which honestly they're all interesting fights, Sandhagen versus O'Malley is fantastic. A rematch with Jan I will have no problem against, although Jan is fighting Figueiredo now, unfortunately, so maybe he gets the winner of Jan Figueiredo, or Cejudo. You know, that's a big name. That's a former champion. Where do you think he should go?
Man, as much as I'd love to see him and Sandhagen, I think that's probably the best just pure action fight that you can make for O'Malley right now. I think Cejudo's the route to go.
Okay.
The UFC is clearly wanting this guy to be the next big thing. They've made a very clear effort in putting him front and center and giving him the best looks and making sure a lot of marketing dollars are going his way. Henry Cejudo, I think, is the way to maximize that and hopefully boost him back up to where he's in position to fight for a belt. Because quite honestly, as fun as the Sandhagen fight looks like it could be on paper, I don't think that goes well for O'Malley. I think that's a tricky matchup for him. Jan, as if he did walk away with that win, but it was very controversial. Do you want to take that chance again? You know, and then especially knowing that it's just going to lead to Jan versus Davishvili 2, another fight that while it may have some appeal to the diehards, like I don't think that's going to move too many units. So Cejudo is probably the guy. He's the guy with the biggest name value. He has the most decorated resume out of everyone that we've mentioned before. And I think presents perhaps the easiest stylistic matchup for him as well.
I think on a business level, I agree with you. Cejudo makes the most sense because if he loses to Corey Sandhagen, unfortunately for us diehard fans, we know how great Sandhagen is, but I feel like to a mainstream casual audience that's followed Sean O'Malley, losing to him is like, oh, who's that guy? It helps Corey a lot. And I think that's why he wants to fight, because he knows he can win and it's a big for his career. But for the UFC and their business, if he loses to Cejudo, he's a bit more of a mainstream. And if you can write it off as, oh, he lost to an Olympic champion who was a former 2-division champion in the UFC. Okay, well, there's no shame in losing that. And he loses to Jan. It's like, oh, again, Jan is kind of hit a bit of a slump the last few years, so his name value is taking a hit. So, yeah, I think Cejudo's the fight to go. And if he gets the win over Cejudo, it's like, oh, I beat Henry Cejudo, one of the great fighters of this generation, former 2-division champion, Olympic, medalist, Triple C guy. It just bolsters his resume, even if Cejudo ain't the guy he was a few years ago because of that retirement. So yeah, I agree with you 1,000%.
I do think a matchup that we're not giving enough credit to right now for O'Malley that really could boost him back into the public consciousness is O'Malley defending his boy Aiden Ross and fighting some of the LA rappers that are very mad at him right now.
Oh, that's true. That those classics in the streets fights, those really hit.
Yeah, he could go platinum on World Star. I could see that.
Yeah, the mixtape of fight booking. I like it.
Yeah, to see like the guy with the colorful hair, like fighting a bunch of Crips and Bloods in the streets of LA.
Yeah.
Maybe
we could bring back
TV,
Punk
I guess.
2 or something.
Yeah.
Moving
Think
on
gets to finish there? Probably not. All
no,
right.
thank God, no. Moving on from there, another big surprise. Well, this was a far bigger surprise. Sean O'Malley was going against a very good fighter. It's like a pound-for-pound level fighter. Is Anthony Joshua lost to his fight over the weekend to Dubois. What are your thoughts on this? Because this follows Deontay Wilder not losing too long ago, and Tyson Fury lost late last year. It's very much an end of an era, but where does Anthony Joshua go from here? And were you caught off guard by the loss to Dubois, or in some ways, I don't want to say overrated for Anthony Joshua, but there's just a difference between Anthony Joshua and Wilder Fury, and he's a little bit more susceptible to upset. So it necessarily wasn't a shocker that he lost that fight.
I was surprised watching it. In hindsight, though, I probably shouldn't have been. Like Daniel Dubois is sort of the perfect guy, and that was the perfect moment for him to just assert his dominance and just do what he does. What Dubois did against Hrgovic was endure a crap ton of punishment in the opening moments, and then just go at it continually and throw heavy leather back at him and make him pay for everything, that strategy would work very well against a guy like Anthony Joshua, because we've seen it in the past. We've seen it in the first Ruiz fight. We've seen it against Usyk. Like if you crack him early, you know, you kind of can have your way with him. I mean, I'll give Anthony Joshua all the credit in the world for really just going out on his shield. Like he didn't quit at all. His body just literally gave out on him. So he was in it in like a warrior standpoint. But as far as where you go with him next, I think the Wilder fight is the most logical thing, because those are two names that are still big, that can still attract a lot of attention, a matchup that people have wanted to see for a very long time. They're both coming off of really, really bad performances. And why not? Because you're probably not going to have the opportunity to do it again.
Yeah, and it really, to coin a traditional wrestling phrase, it really should be like a loser leaves town kind of match. Like loser has to retire. Like this is kind of the last stand for both of them. It is an end of a fascinating era in boxing, where we went from the Evander Holyfields to Mike Tyson's, and guys like Riddick Bowe and Lennox Lewis were tall and stuff like that, to, you know, value of the giant. But like this era of the giants, these really tall 6'5" and over heavyweights, is kind of, now we're shifting to, we have a little bit of that, but we have some other guys. But yeah, I agree. I think it's with both of them. It's a shame that it's a shame that, you know, Fury and Joshua didn't fight when it really mattered a lot more, that Wilder and Joshua didn't fight where it really mattered more. But hey, if we get it, it's better than nothing. In an industry where we've gotten too much of, oh, never got that fight, should have happened. Yeah, might as well. It's still, like you mentioned, it's a fight that both of them can make money off of. And maybe if it's a great fight, you parlay it into a rematch. And then if the other guy wins the rematch, maybe it becomes a trilogy. And that's how they kind of end their career, with maybe a fun trilogy. But yeah, there's not a lot of better options out there for either guy. And at this point in their careers, they got to just maximize their money opportunities. So fighting each other makes the most sense. And if you do it in England, or if you do it in Saudi, they throw a bunch of money at them. Yeah. The best way. I
mean, as long as we just take that rematch clause with Dubois and just light it right on fire, just please burn that thing to a crisp. I don't want to hear about that again. That is just not the fight to make right now for Joshua.
Yeah. As always, wherever you're watching or listening, please hit the share, hit the subscribe button, comment what do you think about what should be next for Anthony Joshua, what should be next for Sean O'Malley. Moving on from there, was able to get some interesting answers from Tom Aspinall for exclusive on Ringside Intel. Got to ask him about the John Jones fight and various other things. And his answer is pretty much like, at this point, even though he believes he has to be more stronger publicly to push for the fight, which he's trying to do, he just doesn't think that fight's going to happen. He thinks John will do whatever it takes to just avoid fighting him. So I asked about the idea of fighting Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov, and he'll fight whoever. Assuming the Jones fight doesn't happen, which I can, Jones versus Stipe Miocic is going down in November. I can see both of them retiring after this. And Aspinall's probably not going to fight John Jones. I get that sense. What fight? Because they were supposed to be Gane versus Volkov. They were supposed to fight each other. That fight's not going to happen now. Of Gane, Volkov, or somebody else, who should probably get the title shot for what's going to probably soon be the linear title when these two retire, and then interim title just becomes the real one for Tom Aspinall?
I mean, if you had to pick between Gane or Volkov, I'm going to go Volkov because he's been successful as of late. Like, Gane is pushing up on the same inactivity that John Jones is. Like, he hasn't fought since that fight either. So I that's the fight I'm more interested in. I'd rather see Aspinall versus Cyril Gane. I think that's a better style matchup. That just feels like a lot of fun as well. But we just haven't seen Gane for so long that I don't know if we're going to get the best product when that happens. If he were to walk into it right now.
Yeah, I'd rather see the Gane fight. I'm a fan of Gane. I think he's a fantastic fighter. Yeah, he has his flaws, but same can be said about a lot of fighters that are pretty good. And yeah, the Volkov fight, Tom already beat him. I mean, I've always have a high level of respect for Volkov, but he always has kind of seemed like a guy in big fights. He kind of falls flat a little bit. So at least the Gane and Aspinall one is fresh. It hasn't seen before. And I think that's a fight that you can do in a big arena in England or in France. You got the England versus France element of it. You can maybe put it in Wembley or something like that, or one of these soccer team stadiums. You can probably do a pretty good crowd, especially if you put a Paddy Pimblett on it and put some other English or French fighters. I think it could do well, and I think it's the more dangerous fight. Like Gane, if you can wrestle Gane and get him down, yeah, he can beat him. If you can't, he is a handful and a half. We saw that with Francis Ngannou. I know Francis Ngannou had his injuries, but Francis Ngannou had trouble dealing with him on the feet because the guy's just so fast. He uses his distance. So that'd be a fantastic fight. I wish that one as well. Speaking of fights, interesting. Dana White has made some very interesting comments of late. Revealed plan that he expects to get into the boxing business after kind of hinting at it for a long time, but never jumping back into the water after years being involved with it. And he's going to be involved with Turki Al-Sheikh. Also, Oscar De La Hoya, along with Turki, was at 306. Maybe something with Oscar. Oscar's been working with his eminence or his Saudiness or whatever it is. They're kind of working together. Maybe Oscar and Dana have always had issues, but maybe this is an alliance being formed for boxing's sake. What do you think? I mean, we got Al-Sheikh, however said his tardiness. Him and Dana are going to work together. That's big because you got this huge money and you have a fantastic promoter. Maybe if you get Oscar involved, you get a pool of fighters that can help with that as well. Is this a grand scheme by the three? And as they touch the glowing orb of boxing, is this their plot? Their plan to take over boxing? And can it work? And should it work? Is this the way boxing needs to go? We need to get a bunch of people together that have all these strong elements and abilities and make like a UFC of boxing. And Dana White is the guy to do it.
Do we really want that? Like that's a big question to ask. Like, because there are some really cool things about having one league sort of control everything, but there are a lot of bad things about having one league control everything. So if I'm a top level boxer, I don't like this idea at all because, my 45% of gate revenue and my 30% of pay-per-view and all in my 20% of concessions and all the crazy percentages that these guys get per event when you are at the absolute top level. Yeah, be happy with a 50K bonus, bro. Because that's what it's going to be headed to. Because as you eliminate competitors, there's no incentive to lure talent monetarily. Then it's just, hey, you want this pat on the back, this AO boy. That's exactly what they'll be fighting for. If this master plan of a league comes to fruition. That being said, this master plan, I guarantee you, Dana is not sitting there trying to plot with Oscar De La Hoya. That's not happening.
Never know. You never know. Vince McMahon worked with Eric Bischoff for the wrestling fans. You never know. No,
I'm not saying that it's not going to happen. I'm saying that that's not what Dana's thinking about right now. That's going to be something that Turki is going to have to put together. He's going to have to put some of these people in the same room and facilitate the conversations in order for these things to happen, or just write a big enough check to where they just hide the lead pipe and the baseball bat behind their back and just talk to each other. Like that's the only way that's going to happen. Now, I do think that boxing can benefit from some of the UFC style or some of the things from the UFC. And Turki Al-Sheikh has done a decent job of introducing some of these elements, which is why he's garnered so much support among the fan base, because he is helping put together these matches between these different promoters that people want to see. The whole Queensberry versus Matchroom card was fantastic. And like, we pretty much will never see a UFC versus a PFL as of right now. We never got UFC versus Strikeforce. We never got, we got iterations of Pride versus the UFC. We got little touches of it here and there, but we never got the full-on package of what promotion versus promotion looks like. Turki Al-Sheikh has been able to deliver that. So he's got to get his credit for that. I think we can look at we were just talking about how crazy the heavyweight division has been lately, just a couple minutes ago. The heavyweight division right now is sort of, I think, what we could look forward to if there was some league where everyone is just fighting one another and losses don't mean as much, because you look at just about everybody ranked in the top 10 at heavyweight, whether you're looking at, the rankings that we put together for Ringside Intel, you look at ESPN, you look at Boxing Scene or any other major outlet, and just about everybody's got a loss. Except Usyk, right? I think Usyk's like the only one, and except for a couple guys that are coming up that that most people have not heard of yet, that are 20-0 and whatnot, and they're working their way up. But all the guys you've heard of, with the exception of Usyk, have a loss. Let the best fight the best. If you lose, you lose. It happens, because fights, anything can happen. So if that is the mentality that's adopted by just the sport of boxing, I'm cool with that. I just don't like a lot of the business implications that come with it.
I'm torn. The point of fighter pay, that's a big one. That's the only issue I have with it, because otherwise I think it needs to happen. I'm over boxing, and I'm not the only one. We're tired of it. UFC has shown an idea that works. Not great for fighter pay, but it delivers for the fans. It delivers for the people that are putting tickets down, for the pay-per-view buys. I'm just over, I would love a ultimate boxing championship title, so we can get rid of these dumbass commissions. Maybe we get rid of all these dumb weight classes, and we cut 3 or 4 of them out of, I just think boxing has become so dumb. Boxing has become so ridiculous. Jake Paul is a name. Boxing is so ridiculous that we have celebrity boxing that is making money on DAZN. This is not good. You're not having that in UFC. MMA is not happening, because UFC is the biggest. It's the NFL of MMA, and it's where everybody wants to go. And it's where the fights would go. And we get the fights. Rarely do we not get the fights we want in UFC. Okay, we look at, we didn't get GSP versus Anderson Silva. And there's like 3 or 4 others, but we always get the fights we want. Boxing has made a tradition on not giving us the fights that we want. So I would be completely open to it. You got the financial might. You've got a genius of a promoter. I say do it. I think the only drawback, but that can be fixed with Turkey. His Saudiness is money. He can pay people a lot of money, and that's the big difference. Maybe that's a thing, but they could promote fighters better. Fighters might become better names. You might get some young stars. We won't have this. Oh, well, Shakur Stevenson fight Gervonta. But now they're just gonna fight, and it's gonna be on a car with another. I'm so for it. I'm curious to see what Dana does. I don't think he'd get into anything unless he thought he could be successful. So I'm curious what they do, and to have him working with Al Sheikh is fascinating, and they can get Del Hoy involved too. He can be one of the faces of it. He has a long history. He's a legend. He has a stable of fighters. He's a good talent evaluator. He's a great talent evaluator until his fighters get tired of him and then they leave, but he finds talent, and that's what you want.
He's a great talent evaluator until they check their bank accounts.
yeah. Until they, so Oscar won't be handling the bank accounts, but he should be involved.
They look at that contract. I'm like, what the hell? And then, then all of a sudden it happens. You bring up some very good points, and I think from a fan perspective, that is certainly a valid take to have. But I think for guys like me and you who have invested a great deal of our adult lives into this and deep diving into a lot of the nooks and crannies that the average person is not, we have to err on the side of caution here. A boxing league sounds initially really great. Remember, there was a lot of energy around the UFC after the tough era, the first tough season. That all that energy, and I'm sure you remember that very, very fondly. Looking forward to seeing the UFC card and knowing the best were fighting the best. Yeah. Here we are some years down the line. The UFC is by far and away the most successful fight promotion that's ever existed. And now we're sitting here twiddling our thumbs, thinking to ourselves, do we really want to watch UFC Vegas 79 prelims today?
It's not good, but it's still better than most boxing cards.
I beg to differ, man. I'm actually more entertained by boxing now than I am mixed martial arts in general.
Okay.
Which is kind of odd to say, because the action in mixed martial arts, I think has a more visceral appeal to it, because you got kicks and knees and whatnot. Just more the action movie things can happen.
Yeah.
But I like the pace of boxing is something different now. I think that the names that we're hearing about more and more, they're starting to intermingle a lot more than we're used to. It's having an energy around it. I mean, we can thank Turkey for a lot of that, for bringing some of these names together. If there is going to be some league, or at least some, like, if he is sort of the central piece, it's sort of getting everyone to play ball with one another, I'm cool with that. I mean, if Dana White's going to be involved, that Eddie Hearn is going to be a part of it. Frank Warren is probably going to be there. De La Hoya is aligning himself with Turkey as well, so he's probably going to be in the mix. Then that means that some of the other promoters are going to have to start playing ball too, and you're going to have all these people just mixing and mingling, and their fighters are going to be doing the same. So I'm cool with that. Now, as far as Jake Paul, being a thing, I don't think that's the fault of boxing necessarily. It's because combat sports has always been a sideshow to real sports, right? It's always been this sort of circus attraction, and some people just highlight the circus part of it a little more than others. But it is sort of a ridiculous thing when you look at it compared to some of the more traditional stick and ball sports, as far as how they're run, as far as the oversight, as far as the personalities involved. We're talking about a whole nother subset of society that tends to attract a lot of really crazy people. So sometimes those really crazy people are just genuinely really crazy, and they do crazy things, and you have a Jake Paul that becomes a star.
I have to push back on that because there was a time where boxing was the biggest sport in America, in the world. I mean, Max Schmeling versus Joe Louis was the biggest moments in sports history in the world. And this is a time when baseball's still around, other sports. There was once a great deal of prestige. Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier was one of the biggest, events in the world, in America. Like, boxing was number one for a time. Boxing ruined itself when guys were, going to jail and then getting a title fight, people biting ears, Galata versus Bo. Like, it made itself a sideshow. It wasn't a shy show because it was a prestige sport with the best and the toughest. People could understand, just like Dana White's always pushed. So I think it's turned itself into a sideshow. It's pushed away young fans that UFC gladly picked up. It made itself a golf audience where it's just older people. And unfortunately, boxing was able to get some younger fans because Jake Paul brought his younger fans. I just think. And also, just, I'm tired of these promoters, like the Don Kings, the Bob Arams. Like, there's a lot of cons, but getting these guys and their agendas, because they're out to make their money, and you just break it down to one, it just makes it better for the fan. I feel sorry for the fighter in that way, a lot of ways, but boxing has done a lot over the last century to ruin itself. We'll see. I'm curious to see how this plays out. It's a fascinating story either way, and it'll open up much more debate for us in the future. Yeah. But let's get into some UFC 307.
This ain't over, buddy. This ain't over.
It's not. We will be talking about his saltiness many more times. UFC 307 predictions. This is, they should have had this card in the Sphere. This should have been the Sphere card. The Sphere card was meh, and there was always a concern it will be meh, and it was. Thankfully, they had the great videos and all that kind of stuff, and it was fun. This card's very good. A lot of interesting fights. First, let's get into this one. This is a real low-key, old school versus new school, not in fighting style, very similar kind of fight styles, but just a different clash of eras. We got Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Joaquin Buckley. How do you see this one? This is a big step up for Joaquin. He's finally, not to say that he can't win this fight. He definitely can win this fight. It's just finally like a really big name that he's kind of wanted. Stephen Thompson's taking a bit of a risk. This is kind of a high risk, low reward, fight for him. If he beats Joaquin Buckley, yeah. So, that's not going to get him a title shot. Buckley is back in the top 10, top 15, but it's not going to catapult him into a fight against Bilal Muhammad or something like that. So it's fascinating matchup. How do you think this one plays out?
Oh man. I'm really divided on this one because Wonderboy has these skills necessary to straight up embarrass Buckley. Like he's got every tool needed to have an easy day at the office against Buckley. The problem is those tools might be a little rusty now. those tools have been sitting on the shelf for a little bit and collected some dust. So I don't know if Wonder Boy Thompson, no longer, I shouldn't even say Wonder Boy, the Wonder Man. I don't think I don't know if the Wonder Man has it in him still, because remember last time when he fought Kevin Holland, and I'm trying to think, was that us? If on this show or if it was my old podcast, I can't remember. But I definitely said leading up to that fight, Wonder Boy might have one of those perfect performances in him, and Kevin Holland is the perfect guy to put on that perfect performance. Buckley is that same sort of person that has everything laid out for Thompson to put together one of his marquee showcases, but I just don't think he has it physically in him anymore to do it. Give me Joaquin Buckley. I don't know if he gets the finish. Screw it, he gets the finish. I think he's gonna knock out Wonder Boy here. A late stoppage, but I think it's gonna be pretty definitive, and then the end comes. I like Buckley to win this.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree. It just feels like UFC is making this fight because they know what it can mean for Buckley, even though, it's like my brain says, oh, Stephen Thompson, this guy fought for the title multiple times, very good fighter, has been a good fighter, ranked fighter for like almost the last decade, but you can't deny the stat. The guy's 41. He's gonna be 42 years old in a few months, early next year. Hasn't fought in a year. He's been losing. He's lost 3 out of his last 4. Some of them definitively. Now, granted, very good fight. He lost to Shavkat, great fighter. Bilal Muhammad, great fighter. But that's just the nature of the fight game. Like once Father Time gets a grip on you, it's hard to let go. And especially he's a style. He has a style where he relies heavily on reflexes, and that's just never good when you get older. He was a power puncher, and that was his game. Then you can always turn back the clock. But I don't like this matchup. I think Buckley gets the finish as well. Moving on from there, this is another fascinating fight. Kayla Harrison, her second fight in the UFC versus Ketlin Vieira. Where do you see this one going? I mean, Ketlin's a good, solid fighter. I think this is a winnable fight. Is there any danger in this for Kayla Harrison?
I mean, there's always going to be some level of danger when you're talking about professional fighters, but I just don't see where Vieira wins this. Like, I don't think she's a particularly gifted striker, so I don't see her just running over Harrison in that regard. And even if she was, you close that distance too much, you're going to go for a ride and you're going to be on your back. And then when this fight is on the ground, Vieira just doesn't show enough submission prowess or even positional dominance to say that you're going to handle an Olympic gold medalist in judo on the ground. I just don't see that happening. And quite frankly, the UFC would be really, really silly to put Kayla Harrison in against Ketlin Vieira if they didn't think Harrison was going to win, because Harrison is a shoo-in for a title shot. A shoo-in of a potential star for the promotion, and Ketlin Vieira just simply is not. So that would just be a tremendous waste of one of the biggest sought-after free agents in the sport's history.
This one's a weird one for me. I think Harrison should win it, but Ketlin Vieira is that kind of weird fighter who can just somehow turn things into an ugly, sloppy fight and make things difficult for people that should beat her. Like she beat Holly Holm, and now granted Holly Holm was his past her prime, but still got a win over Holly Holm. Mish Tate, Raquel Pennington, who's a champion now at the division, got just a split decision out of her. Penny Kianto, who's a good striker. She's that weird kind of fighter, like doesn't jump off the page, but I'm forgetting his name, but there's just those fighters that they just have a style like a Keith Jardine, like those kinds of guys that they're not great, but they sometimes go in there with people that are better, and they just make it difficult for them somehow just by pure will and decent, solid all-around skills. I think Caitlin should win, but I wouldn't be surprised. I think Caitlin's a live underdog. I think she'll make it difficult, and I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to decision and stuff like that, and she doesn't finish her, and it's not easy. But yeah, it's a weird one, but I'm going to go with Harrison too. Another one, bit of a clash of errors. We got Jose Aldo, second fight after retirement, versus Mario Batista, a very good under the radar young fighter at bantamweight, who in his let's go back to his recent hit list. He's got some surprising wins. Let me see here.
Yeah, Ricky Simone and Brian Kelleher probably
Ricky Simone,
most known wins.
He's won several fights in a row. He rounded into like becoming, it seemed like he was a good prospect. Weren't sure where he's going to go, and he's kind of found himself, and he's really started to hit it like a momentum, and momentum, confidence, always key. The brain says Jose Aldo. He's Jose Aldo. Of course he's going to be, but again, age. This is the reason he retired a couple of years ago. Losing to good fighters, but he's not the guy he used to be. And just because of age, he's still a relevant fighter, still not going to be an easy out for anyone, but just age gets the best of them, man. You can't always compete at a high level. I really feel like this could be just one of those, he came out of retirement, look what he did in his last fight, but that reality was set. He's not, Mario Batista is not going to finish him or anything, but I can see Mario Batista squeaking out a decision. He's just, like those classic things where the older fighter can't pull the trigger enough, and that the opportunity's there, but they don't make the most of it, and it won't be a dominant win. But I just feel like Mario Batista, it's just the way things are, the age, they're booking this fight for a reason. I think Batista squeaks out a win here. What do you think?
You know what? I'm fully on board with the Aldo resurgence hype train. Okay. I do think obviously age is a factor here, but we haven't really seen Aldo age yet. Like he's still, and even as he's had injuries and limitations throughout his career, he's always been able to adapt his style to fit them accordingly. Remember, he was the nastiest leg kicker the world had ever seen until he got into a motorcycle accident and injured his foot or something like that. And when he messed up his foot, throwing some kicks on Korean Zombie. And after that, he stopped relying on the leg kicks as much, but damn, that jab became a laser sharp weapon, and then his takedown defense has evolved. He's responded to every limitation with a new wrinkle to his skill set at ages where most people just are who they are. I don't think Mario Batista is going to expose anything here, because this is a huge leap up in competition. There is a big difference from aging, quote unquote, diminished Jose Aldo and Ricky Simone. There's a huge difference, huge difference. And Damon Blackshear, like good fighters, but Aldo is one of the best who's ever done it, and quite honestly has a great case to be considered the GOAT. He's still got a lot of that in him. Even his time off in the UFC was not spent sitting on the couch eating bonbons. He was out there boxing, and he was looking sharper than an MMA fighter should in those scenarios. Give me Aldo to win. I don't know if he gets the finish, because one thing about Aldo, this version of Aldo, he's not chasing the finish as much as he's just trying to do what he does. I can see him just like he did in his last fight, sort of picking up steam early, and then once he's built up a very clear lead, just doing what he has to do and seeing that final bell. Give me Aldo by decision here.
Yeah, Aldo's always been that guy that's like, man, he's only 32 still. He's only 33, but 38 and 135 pounds. That one's just worries me. But moving on from there to the women's 135-pound title. Raquel Pennington, I believe it's her first title defense, versus Juliana Pena, a matchup that maybe we both could agree we wouldn't mind a double knockout. I'm not sure, but I don't know what to make of Juliana Pena. She just reminds me of like female Diego Sanchez, like nothing fancy. It's just will and guts and horsepower, and she's going to take her takedown. It's not highly technical, and she's going to take too many shots. She's going to be bloody, you're going to black. I just feel like, and not to say that Raquel Pennington has really become a spectacular fighter. She kind of still is who she's always been. I just think the division has just lost a lot of the elite talents, and she just, good matchup, got the title fight, and won it, but not a spectacular fight. But I still think in the end, she's probably still good enough in her takedown defense, experienced enough, good stand up, that she'll do enough to keep Juliana at bay and work out a decision. Juliana will get her takedowns here and there, but I think Raquel will work her way out of it. She's just good, sound fighter just because she's got so much experience. I see Raquel Pennington get a unanimous decision. What do you think about this one?
I agree with you on this one. I mean, I'll say, like, I'm not hoping for a double knockout here because I actually like Raquel Pennington. So I just want a singular knockout. Just one person getting laid out flat and I'll be a very happy man. Because I think Juliana Pena is like the goofiest person the sport has ever seen. Like, what a cornball.
That's saying something. There's been some goofy person.
Lord, like, what a ridiculous personality. Just get her all the way up out of here. And like, I do understand her case for the title shot. Like, I get it. She was the last person to hold the belt until Nunes retired. Cool. And she was supposed to get that fight against Nunes, end up being her retirement fight. Cool. She's here. I don't think, though, that this is the person that Pena style of just berserker rage is going to work very well on.
Yeah.
Raquel Pennington is no stranger to berserker rage. She's got enough berserker rage in her to be one of the more consistently tough women that it fights, actively. I don't think Pena is going to go in there and just land some punches and just steamroller. And the way she does that thing where she's just throwing the reverse punches like from her hip and just running forward. Yep. Like, I don't think this is going to work very well on Pennington. Yeah. Even if you land on her a couple of times, you get in close enough, she's gonna clinch up on you. She's gonna push you against the fence. She's gonna grind you out. And she has just enough technical prowess to style on her. Like, she's got just enough of it to style on her and just enough of the knucklehead in her to kind of hang in that realm. So this is not a good matchup for Pena. Never mind the fact that she's been off for quite some time. And we've seen Pennington endure some very interesting, situations and fight back to get wins. We've seen Pena boo from the stands. That's all we've seen from her. So I think Pena, I think Pena's going down here, and hopefully Raquel Pennington can keep us from another title reign of perhaps the most cringe person in mixed martial arts history.
And Pennington has been in war. She can handle war. I think that was the weird thing with Nunes. I don't think Nunes she got uncomfortable in a war and started making surprisingly bad decisions. Pennington is not going to be, like you said, she's not going to be the berserker attack. It's not going to frazzle her or whatever. So
that's her default is like, okay, I'm going to get dinged upside the head a lot and I'll figure my way out. Like, that's her default setting.
Yeah. Moving on from there, main event, Alex Pereira versus Khalil Roundtree. The fight that no one thought was going to happen, and Khalil Roundtree coming off of shouldn't be happening. I think really the real question is not who's going to win. Why should anyone believe Khalil has a chance? What do you think, Anthony? Is he at all a live dog? Is Father Time going to catch up with Alex? Like, why should anyone take this fight seriously as a real threat to Pereira?
I mean, Khalil Roundtree is a very legitimate threat to anyone that he fights. Roundtree is like a master of violence himself. Like, this is the guy who collapsed the knee with a sidekick, in recent memory. When he's on point, like, he is a nasty, nasty dude. With no aversion to just hurting another person and maiming them to get the W. That's just what he likes to do. The problem is we're not sure what version of him we get sometimes. Like, when he's not in this Neo from the Matrix mode where he's just otherworldly with everything he's doing. It's very underwhelming. If he has an underwhelming moment against Alex Pereira, he is going to get decapitated in there, because Pereira is a true grandmaster of everything violent. So that being said, this fight really should not be happening. You should not come off of a reprimand for PEDs and then get, even if it was an accidental ingestion, you should not come fresh off of that to cut the suspension short, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't they just like cut a suspension short and just say, just go in there and fight?
Yeah, he's gonna be like off suspension, right? Like a week or two before the fight.
Like, come on, fam, what are we doing? Like, this does not make any sense in any legitimate context. But the fight itself, yes, he is a very real threat. I just think that Alex Pereira has kind of seen elements of this before. I don't think this would be anything new for him. So Roundtree, I like to think of him in comparison to Pereira's, some of his more recent opponents, is like the combination of a Adesanya and a Prohaska. He's got that wildness and that sort of just hit you hard and just go nuts with it that Prohaska has, but he has some of the dialed back technique that Adesanya shows. He kind of splits that difference perfectly. I don't think that combination is going to be too much for Pereira to handle, because he's shown how he handles the extreme technician and he's shown how he handles the extreme berserker rage, and he knocks both of them out. So I really think that Khalil is going to fall victim like some of the others have.
It's crazy. It's even more mind-blowing that this fight is happening for all the reasons you mentioned, and then the fact that there's a Magomed Ankalaev out there. Like, that's the guy who should be getting the fight. Like, that's the guy who could really be a problem for the champion. We're here to give fights that can be problematic for a champion and find out who the best in the world is. And then it just you look at his Khalil Rountree's resume. Now, he's won 5 in a row. Great, that's great. But it's like Modestas Bukauskas, Carl Roberson, Justin Jacoby. That's the guy who I was trying to think of when I was talking about, like, Ketlin Vieira just, makes an ugly fight, makes a good fight. Like Justin Jacoby does that. But Chris Daukaus, Anthony Smith, who hasn't been a guy that is really a big threat in like multiple years, like, to go from that to then fight one of the best pound for pound fighters in the world, who is arguably the best fighter of the last 5 years, a 2-division champion, and not even just like an Adesanya, Alex Volkanovski, who are like these really highly technical, very gifted. This guy's technical, but will take your damn head off. Like, he's no joke. He's, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, the only way this happened is like just the magic of MMA. And Alex just gets old, and he just has an old moment. He finally comes. He's kind of over. He's kind of due for. He's at that point in his career where the decline can just happen. That's the only reason. Father Time has to come in and be a tag team partner in a handicap match. I just don't see how Khalil gets this. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's just kind of set up for a highlight reel knockout for Alex Pereira. It just adds to his legacy. But yeah, crazy booking. But that is it for this episode of the Scrap Report. That's what happens when you do 2 podcasts in a row. You get the names confused. But this latest episode of the Scrap Report, please, as always, like, share. Please hit the subscribe button to Parts Unknown or Scrap Report, both Ringside Intel podcasts that I also host. As always, I am Jason Burgos. He is the Gandalf. He's not the Hunter Cannon. He's the Gandalf of Hate, Anthony Walker. Until next time, bye-bye.